Good day, everyone. So originally, I hadn't intended to make a video about the anniversary or anything going on with it, as I kind of had already made a video detailing why I wasn't really expecting anything. As someone whose only experience with gacha games is Genshin Impact, and thus miHoYo, and due to what we've seen of miHoYo so far, simply led me to not really expect anything. And so personally, because I feel like I've kind of come to terms with what to expect and what we're going to get, I personally wasn't angry at the anniversary rewards because it's what I expected. I think a lot of other people, either due to their own experience from other gacha games or because of content creators who play gacha games telling them that anniversaries are generally something where the gacha game will give back to its player base, believed that they were going to get some cool stuff, hopefully, only to not get much at all, which then kind of leads to the fiasco that we ended up facing. Now, it does seem like we're getting a bit of additional rewards, hopefully, with some mails with 400 Primo Gems in them. Hopefully, all of them have something along those lines, and that may hopefully placate the player base a bit. But personally, I don't think it's the rewards themselves that people are truly angry at. And even if they do give more rewards at this point, the real reason I feel like I'm now talking about the anniversary isn't really the anniversary itself, but just my confusion on how miHoYo is handling this game, pertaining to what exactly their goal at this point is. However, as I didn't want this video to purely be about the anniversary, and I had intended to make a video after this event was over, talking about how I feel about Genshin Impact's main events each update, as I haven't really done so up to this point, I figured I may as well make that video now as well. And so first, before I get into talking about my confusion over the anniversary, I do want to talk about the main events in Genshin Impact. And just to clarify what I mean, each update we see a number of events, pretty much all of them giving about 420 Primo Gems, and then we see one event, which is the kind of big event for that update, that gives us something more along the lines of, say, 1,000. Now, pretty much all these events, for me, I'd say, have seriously fallen flat. But that isn't to say there hasn't been anything good about them. A number of the events have had their own strengths, and I'd like to quickly talk about them. The Lantern Rite, to start with, had an absolutely fantastic atmosphere. Liyue Harbor truly felt like it was celebrating a major festival, and looked like it could be a fantastic event. However, in terms of actually doing anything in the event, there are really only two things. Something along the lines of doing basically 28 random quests, and then some tower defense game that, like it or dislike it, didn't seem to have any tie into the Lantern Rite itself at all. So it ended up being the entire event was just helping out a bunch of random people, which we did then get to see their wishes, which I do think helped engrossing us into the event a little, and then some random board game. And one of the major points of it, which was to get Zhao to watch the Lantern Rite, we didn't even really get to see what his reaction to it was after we'd managed to convince him, whether it changed his outlook on anything, or if he even enjoyed it. The quest just sort of ended, like a lot of things in Genshin Impact, where they just sort of abruptly end. And there were no inclusions of any of the playable characters outside of Zhao. So the Lantern Rite had a fantastic atmosphere, but not really much else. Next, we could come to the Windbloom Festival. Now, the Windbloom Festival had Mondstadt dressed up a little bit as well. However, I don't really think that it looked like it was dressed up for a festival, but rather, more so just what the City of Freedom probably should look like at default. Frankly, Mondstadt doesn't look much like the City of Freedom whatsoever. It's the only city that we've seen so far that is completely surrounded by massive stone walls, and has nothing really in it to invoke the feeling of freedom. However, during the Windbloom Festival, with the flowers everywhere, which we learned many of which represented freedom to different people, and the dandelion seeds blowing in the wind, definitely invoked a much greater sense of a city of freedom than the normal Mondstadt. So unlike with Liyue's Lantern Rite, I wouldn't really say it looked dressed up for a festival, but rather just how it should always look. However, what the Windbloom Festival did have was a bunch of minigames. And while playing random minigames wasn't the reason I started Genshin Impact, it was rather enjoyable. It definitely, I think, had a fun aspect to it that a lot of the game doesn't. But aside from these little mini-games, there really wasn't much else. Aside from that, a few of the characters from Mondstadt made very brief appearances, which was better over the no appearances at all from the Lantern Rite. So I definitely think it felt a bit more fun, but I don't think it had the proper festival atmosphere that the Lantern Rite did, and felt a little bit hollow. Then of course there's also events that just completely fall flat. such as the helping some random member of Beto's crew do research into ruin enemies, apparently for some reason. Honestly, still don't even understand what the point of any of that was. Which then leads us into the current event, the Moonlight Merriment. Now, in terms of story and sort of lore-wise and character inclusion, I think so far this event is definitely better than the other events we've seen so far. We're getting some lore into the cuisine of Liyue and this god that seems to have brought it about. And we're learning alongside Keqing and Zhengling and the playable characters in the game instead of the non-playable characters. So this aspect of this event I think has definitely improved. However, everything else about the event, once again, really kind of falls flat. We have the Searching for Moon Chase Charms and Mist Moon Chess, which is essentially just getting chess and Geoculus in an area you've already done so, and which the game itself admits has nothing to do with the Moonlight Festival at all. And then we have what should be, I think, the more interesting thing to do during the Moonlight Festival, which is the Trail of Delicacies. Now, looking at this from this menu, and having these stops and offering delicacies for anyone who plays board games at all, kind of reminds me a little bit of Tokaido, one of the few board games I actually do quite enjoy. However, it is very much so not Tokaido. It's frankly quite uninteresting, and I have to wonder, why is the Traveler doing it? And I don't even mean, why are you doing it? Well, it's pretty obvious why you're doing it. It's for that extra little 100 Primo Gems. But I mean, why is the Traveler even doing this? In terms of the story, there's basically one sentence mentioning that people in the past used to do something along these lines, and that's it. Has the Traveler just by themselves decided, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go call up Venti, have him make me some wind currents, and just make up the Trail of Delicacies by myself. Throw together 5 different dishes and then toss them in the garbage bin. In an event that is about keeping up traditions, which has been mentioned a few times during the story, why isn't the Trail of Delicacies tied into the event itself at all? Instead of having a menu where you basically check off 5 different dishes and then go about fighting 6 different, mostly normal enemy camps for seemingly no reason, why not instead give a brief story of what this trail is supposed to represent? If people in the past went on these trails, there's usually probably a reason for it. Perhaps some folktale legend or some occurrence that really did happen. Perhaps an Adepti set out on a quest from one corner of Liyue to another, eating different dishes given to him along the way to keep up his strength for the journey, to find, say, a rare flower to be used as a medicine for a sickly young child. And this could be given to the Traveler as perhaps in the form of a few little notes, which then could be briefly summarized up here in this menu. And then while you're flying using the air currents from enemy camp to enemy camp, Paimon could be reading to you the brief little text explaining that leg of the Adepti's journey. And then instead of just making 5 random dishes and hitting basically a checkbox in a menu, just like with, say, those cats on Neko's island, where they have the little bowls which you can offer up food, why not instead take those same bowls and put them on something a little bit more festive, even just a rock, which would be located at each enemy camp, where then you would offer up that dish and then gain the bonus. This feels to me like it would be more of a tradition, which is one of the points of the story in this event, and give a little bit of understanding of why the Traveler is even doing it. They are experiencing the Moonlight Festival's traditions, and this would feel a bit more like a tradition as well, while being 2 very, very small changes. You just have to grab someone and say, hey, write 3 tiny little stories about Adepti or something going somewhere for some reason. It can be like a page, it doesn't matter. Then take those bowls, which they already have in the game, which you can put food in, and add them somewhere around the enemy camp. I feel like just those 2 things, 2 small things, could tie this aspect of the event, what you're doing in the event, to the event itself, instead of being completely, entirely, seemingly random. And so, once again, while having the potential of being a great event, due to just lack of care, is the only thing I can really say, it kind of just falls flat, and you honestly wonder, why am I even doing any of this? Ah yes, Primo Gems. And then if you asked yourself, why is the Traveler doing this? I don't even have an answer for that. And then, in terms of atmosphere, honestly, on the way to go talk to Zhengling, I didn't even notice that there was anything different about the town whatsoever. It wasn't until she mentioned something about the town being livened up for the festival that I even realized, and so started playing one of those games where you have two different pictures and you try to pick out what's different. So, while I don't think the major events in this game have been awful, they're severely lacking in different ways. If you take the atmosphere and appearance of Liyue during the Lantern Rite, if you take the fun present in the Windbloom Festival, added in the lore and story, as well as character inclusion that we're seeing in the Moonlight Festival, and then with a little bit of care to actually tie in what you're doing in the event to the event itself, I think we could actually have some really enjoyable events. However, for as long as we continue to basically have only one of those qualities, I think the events will continue to remain lackluster, and the only reason you do it is purely for the Primogems and not because you actually enjoy the event itself. And so with that, we can kind of get into what I wanted to discuss about the anniversary itself, and how I don't think it's really the rewards themselves that have so many people angry at MiHoYo. Genshin Impact is a unique game. Unlike, say, MMOs, which I'm more familiar with, where you may have, say, an expansion every once in a while, perhaps every 4 times a year or something, you go through it and it could take you varying amounts of time. Maybe it only takes you a week to get through everything. Maybe it takes you a month. Maybe it takes you longer. But once you've finished with all the content that you'd like to do, you can just stop. You can take a break. You can go play something else until there's something else major to do. Genshin Impact isn't really like that. In order to obtain, say, all the Primogems, you can. In order to get the characters, which is the practically only lasting thing that remains in the game, you have to play the game every single day. The game demands a significant amount of your time and investment. And what do you get for that? What do you get to use these new characters that you obtain? What gameplay is there for you to use those artifacts which you have spent months and months and months farming? And the answer for the most part is the Spiral Abyss, something which lasts you maybe about an hour once every 15 days, and then maybe 2 week-long events of the entire year of fighting the bosses you've already fought many times in the game, dialed up to 11. And that's all that's been added. The story that's been added to the game is very brief and short. We've had 2 quests, but mostly just really one, involving the character's sibling, which is their main motivation. We've had 3 quests added to the game that advance the story sort of at all, with the new Archon quests, which many, myself included, felt very disappointed with, as to the confusing treatment given to Kokomi and the Resistance, and their complete lack of importance, despite what the trailers and the live streams would have you to believe. And so I think a lot of people who are playing the game have been patient for a long time. We're sure that there's more stuff to come. We're sure that eventually they will add new endgame things to do, aside from just the Spiral Abyss. Hopefully we'll get more story, maybe even more ways to get rewards, so that we can get those characters that we really like. But it has been a year now, and none of that has happened. And in the midst of all of this not happening, MiHoYo then gives its player base back a trifle compared to apparently other gacha games, including even their own gacha game. And then when people respond to this negatively, to either completely ignore them and never respond to it, or actually hush up their feelings. And so personally, I think this is really what people are upset about, that they get on and they play this game every single day, waiting, hoping for new stuff to come out. It doesn't, and MiHoYo won't even acknowledge them. Now in this, what I personally say I find confusing is their handling of this. Because for one, they're obviously not new to the gacha scene. This isn't some company that's trying out gacha for the first time or something along those lines. They have had another gacha game, which I believe is successful, that has been out for a few years now. And they seem to have a much better understanding of giving back to the player base, which is supporting its game, in stark contrast to how they're treating Genshin Impact. They also seem to have taken a stance, really from the get-go of the game, of complete silence. Even this additional rewards, complete silence about. No idea that they were coming. No idea what's going to be even in the rest of them. And if they had announced it earlier, maybe people would have been a little less angry. But they didn't. They actively chose not to. Even though they should have, they would have to know that this is the response that they would get. And all in the while, in the midst of this, having a rather lackluster event of just running around and grabbing chests and a reskinned Geoculus, while during the banner of a character who many considered to be the worst character in the game. If, for example, they had swapped the banners. If Kokomi was first and then Raiden, and so Raiden was currently out and people were testing her and playing with her in different team comps and so on and so forth, I honestly think people in their enjoyment over Raiden Shogun and grabbing those additional little 10 wishes for, say, her banner, they wouldn't have received anywhere near the hatred that they have. And once again, they had to know this would happen, because it's not like they just take a character, they design a character, and then just throw them into the game. They have a beta, and those people in those betas talk about how bad these characters are. It's not like it's not known. They talk about their dissatisfactions with them, but despite having these betas and having these people in the betas telling them all these things, they really don't seem to listen. They just put out what they're going to put out. And so it's hard to feel like this isn't intentional, that they intentionally put a character who many were looking forward to, but ended up being widely considered the worst character, as the rate-up banner during the anniversary period, where they give barely any rewards at all and are completely silent as to whatever following rewards they're going to be. And an event that's basically, hey, you like running around and finding chests, right? Well, go do it again. And so honestly speaking, with all this combined and the complete lack of feedback from MiHoYo, it honestly legitimately feels like they are trying to ruin their own game, as though they felt like they've made enough money off of it, but they don't want to just shut it down in fear of many people then suing them over basically taking loads of their money for nothing, and so are quietly trying to kill it themselves. Hopefully that's not the case, but honestly, with how it's been handled, I don't know how else to explain it, because it's difficult to explain it away through incompetence, as they have another gacha game. This isn't their first time in the rodeo. So I do hope things will get better. I hope that they'll listen to the player base a little more. I hope they will start actually adding lasting content into the game, but those are just hopes. And from what we've seen so far through this year we've had with MiHoYo and Genshin Impact, doesn't really look like it. And so with that negative and sad thought voiced, we reached the end of the video. But what do you guys think? How have you felt about the event so far? Do you think my two little inclusions could make the event a decent bit better? Would you like MiHoYo to actually tie in whatever it is that you're doing to the event itself? Would you like to see the good things that I mentioned in all three of these events be added together for future events? Or do you think that they're fine as they are? Do you find nothing wrong with this event? It's perfectly good and enjoyable. And how do you personally feel about the anniversary? What do you think they should have done? If you feel at all like they should have done anything else at all? I am interested in hearing your opinions, so do let me know down below in the comments. And as usual, thank you for watching. Look forward to seeing you again next time, and hope you all have a great day.